I would like to clarify that when I talk about these three cases, I'm not trying to advocate that we should not be cross-linking. I strongly believe that the predominant evidence still for me is that we should cross-link because majority of cases will progress. It's just these outliers that we should know about and
these are the outliers.
And maybe try to take a message that how it's just open to debate and try to understand that why did not, and then maybe learn from it and try to use that to improve our understanding of.
So what I did was I put this across to my immunologist. You're leaving. Thanks a lot. He has a flight to catch. So I put it across to Dr. Arka is here. I just showed him this, and this is not one case. We have at least 6 to 7 cases where you do one eye, the other eye flattens, something similar to what you do a cross-linking. I said, is there a molecular explanation to why the other eye should behave like a cross-linked eye? I mean, it may sound very crazy, but science is always crazy till you prove it.
In my patients, when they stop rubbing and when they stop to sleep on their eye, you can have sometimes 3 diopters of flattening because it's like a warpage under hard contact lens, which is going away. So the cornea, epithelial layer, for this, it takes 5 microns of epithelium if you, according to Mechanobiology law, a change of keratometry for 1 diopter in 3 mm zone is going to be 5 microns. It's nothing.
So
nothing.
Secondly, this is important. So 5 microns of epithelial change amounts to 1 diopter?
Of course. It applies the Mechanobiology rule.
It depends on the optical zone. It depends on the optical zone and where the change is occurring.
Yeah, there it's close to the center.
So
half a micron. And we have a paper, because you like paper and evidence, is where we studied the repeatability of 3 topographs in keratoconus. If you don't have more than 1.5 diopters in those cases of progression, it's not repeated. It's within the limit of agreement, so it should not be considered as statistically significant.
Also, cone morphology can change over time.
Yeah.
And a small steep cone could become more globular, and that may appear flatter on curvature readings, even though the cone itself encompasses more of the cornea now.
But let's hear some crazy concept from Arka about why this is flattening.
How old are those 6 patients?
This is some 23, 24. They're not older. You can come and explain here with your mic clear, because either way it's very difficult to understand this.
So this is actually the opposite. How old was the patient? Why don't we answer his question first?
23.
22, 23.
Yeah. So this is, explanation by proving the opposite. So this is Jerry Nidacon's work, who's done a lot of work on transplants. So he found that when you do the first transplant, and this is work in mice, which has been correlated with work in results from human corneal transplants. So the first transplant is successful. The second transplant is typically rejected in 50% of the cases. And what they found is when you transplant one eye and not transplant the other eye, after a while when you transplant the other eye gets rejected. So he calls it the sympathetic loss of immune privilege. And this happens because of a molecule called substance P, which is released in the eye once you do the surgery. And that gets released in the other eye as well, which has not undergone surgery. And that downregulates the T regulatory cells, which allow for transplants to be retained. So by corollary, the opposite of that could be happening. So by cross-linking the cornea in one eye, maybe you're calming down the inflammatory systems that are in place that drive the disease, and that calms down the other eye as well, and maybe that's what's taking place.
So to prove this, what I've started doing is, I'm taking the tears of the eye, both the eyes before the surgery. I'm looking for this substance P and all these factors, right? And I'm not bothered about the eye which I've cross-linked. I'm monitoring the tears of the eye which is not cross-linked. And if I find a patient who's showing a 2 diopters of flattening without anything, and if I see that these molecules are showing a change, that means we believe that this works. And I've given a term for this work. I don't know how far people would. I'll call it as a sympathetic cross-linking. That means I've not cross-linked that eye, but it's sympathetically cross-linked. to the other eye. And I think it is not happening. Personally, I'm also a believer in eye rubbing, with all due respects. I believe there's a molecular pathway which is making the other eye in some patients happen. And I'm sure next year we'll have one of these molecules being, this is a study, and Sharon is not here. We also doing the immune trafficking of these cells which will directly prove this concept that if you damage one eye's nerves and do a cross-linking, like you mentioned, de-innervation, the other eye also will start showing a change. And that other eye change is what will tell us why some patients still progress on the other eye, and a lot of them just suddenly start flattening. And this is probably the answer for the other eye being cross-linked, and I call it sympathetic cross-linking.
Why would cross-linking make the cornea flatter to start with? Why? What is the rationale behind that?
I think he should answer. I think Farhad should answer this. Why does cornea become flatter after cross-linking?
Let Theo answer it, please. I have another comment to make.
Before I'm answering that question, because I have not a good answer to that, actually I don't know. Yeah. All this compression stuff that people were talking about is just ideology, nothing substantial behind it. Also, would have had this talk. Oh, that's a different story. No, I would like to share with you that patient of mine who had rubbing in both eyes, and the parents tried to reduce it, and then it was a 9-year-old boy coming in and had severe progression. Although I had FML and all pharmaceutical approaches to reduce rubbing, and then we did, because he was not good in school, we did, before the Christmas holidays, we did cross-linking one eye because he didn't want to miss school time. And we decided to do the second eye prior to just before the summer holidays. Now, that bad eye reacted in a typical way, a little bit of flattening, but not significant flattening. It was just kind of stabilization, at least what I meant. But he came back in May with a high drops in the fellow eye. So now, guess, and that was the story. I had to do a penetrating keratoplasty, and the patients were a little bit not happy about me because we had to do the crossing in the second eye earlier. Now those patients are coming, the parents are coming back with the sister of that boy. Progressive in both eyes. What shall I do?
And one of the things which is very important take home from what we discussed in the previous case, and Himanshu said, and what you're saying, which all of us should take home here is, we don't know yet, but when you do a procedure on one eye, there is definitely a lot of immune trafficking and immunology changes in the other eye, which you're not done. Swami works on immune trafficking. Would you agree to this?
Yeah,
and then I'll ask you.
That's been known for a very long time.
But we have not, as clinicians, we don't use it or we don't know about it.
If you look at the, I'm switching from cornea to retina, but in the early trials for 2RT laser for AMD, the drusen were lost in the treated eye, and the drusen was significantly reduced in the untreated eye. And many, many years ago in the 1960s, when they were doing ruby laser iridotomies, the pressure went down in the other eye. So I absolutely agree, you can produce an effect in one eye, and you will get a minor change of the required kind in the other eye.
So should we charge both eyes when we do only one eye now? It's a good question. Should we charge
Should we charge for both eyes? We charge for one eye.
He's not an MD, he doesn't care about it.
I don't care about cost, but 1.5 times.
So I'm going to back you up a little bit. It's hard to get a word in edgewise with all the arguments. But going back to the slide that you showed about progression, every imaging we currently have, including anything I've done, is very limited in really determining progression. And curvatures really don't add and subtract the way we do it. It's not really, the only system I've ever worked at, and this is 21-year-old map. This was a PARS system that was able to image out to the sclera. So we registered at the sclera. When we want to see change, you really need to superimpose images, not subtract two different images. So this is actually a post-ablation where we did a subtraction registered at the limbus pre and post, and you can see what the ablation was from the black to the red. That's really how we should be looking for progression, by taking some anatomical landmark that we think doesn't change and register the images. Currently, I'm not aware of any system that can actually do that.
I think the OCT-based topographers probably should be the future if you're looking at the progression then, because then you'll have a limbus to limbus
Anyone
marker.
that I have access to,
They don't do it.
they can't get out to the limbus with accuracy. This system, unfortunately, was never commercially viable, but you could image the entire globe almost out. There was no limit as to, and it had high accuracy, and that's been published.
Farhad, you said you had something about that, which I call a sympathetic cross-linking about the immune changes.
Yeah, if you could, sorry for not commenting on this, but if you could just go back.
Go back to his the
Progression
slides, please. So Swami is here. He works on immune trafficking. So I mean, he can give his points. Okay, you see it here.
To the topography, just.
The previous slide, topography slide.
Forget the science.
Yeah.
Just very briefly, 2 comments. On one hand, I congratulate you because you do an assumption, and next year you will follow up with some hard data. So we can look at these data. This is what I'm missing in the eye rubbing model for now. Maybe it will come. On the other hand,
I'll take that point.
if this is, on the other hand,
We have some data for him also. I made some data for him, so I'll at the end I will show you to help him out. That we had some data for
So
eye rubbing.
finally some data. But if everything is based on an assumption, we all look at the interval. It's 4 months, and a 20-year-old Scheimpflug imaging system is getting more imprecise the steeper the ectasia is. And we all know from clinical experience other cases where I do crosslink and I do a 2-year follow-up. And then if I have 4 images during these 4 years, I will have at least one outlier that explains the opposite to me. But I have to look at the bigger picture and have a series of follow-ups to understand what has happened to this cornea. So with all due respect,
just to
this
answer
4-month
your question
follow-up with
here,
the steep
there are-
with the flattening doesn't explain anything to me.
That's what. See, just to answer this is one of those cases which had a good one, but I have some series of patients for close to 1 or 2 years now, more than 2 years, where they're still holding on. And if I look at the file, my EMR, I've written that progression in 2016, both eyes, right eye cross-linking, 3 months later, the left eye cross-linking. And then you see that patients, for some reason, wait for some longer time and they don't come back to you. They've stopped all drops and they're not rubbers. They come back to after 1 year and you look at your file and you see the other eye, it's getting better. Then you tell the patient that, you just hold on for some more time, and then you see that it's getting stable. That is what the biggest challenge is, that why are they stopping progression if they're not rubbing their eyes?
I have to say something because I know I wrote a couple of opinion papers, but an opinion paper doesn't mean it's not substantiated by logical evidence, a deep analysis of the literature, and try to come with a model or a predictional theory, let's say, which can encompass all what we know about keratoconus. For example, people believe it's a genetic disease. I say, yeah, maybe, but it's only 15% of cases that are not sporadic, etc., etc. So people say it's an ectasia. Well, there's no change in the surface of the cornea, so it's not maybe an ectasia. Eye rubbing is directly exerted on the cornea. So, it's not an opinion paper like my opinion is that it's eye rubbing. It comes from a broad analysis, like stepping back, erasing everything I knew about keratoconus that I've been taught about, that it is a known dystrophy, blah, 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 and then try to make a comprehensive model of explanation. Now, I take your point. Any model must be proven by prediction, which will, if the model is right, give the right conclusions. So what we do in Paris, and it's a brave study that I do because I take the responsibility of that, every patient that comes to me with progressions, keratoconus, etc., we follow them, we really insist on the rubbing part, we give them patches at night, and to me, I will know soon the the outcome of that study, because now we studied like 3 years ago. But I'm very confident in what I'm saying, because all patients who stop rubbing, they don't progress. The ones who do progress, they acknowledge that they rub, like Down syndrome patient, because they cannot really control themselves. Young children, of course, because for the same reason, etc. But when you have adults in Paris, like they are 18-year-old coming with their parents for a second opinion on cross-linking, would I look a good doctor if I would say, no, don't do it? And if the parents would come back with the son with progression? No. I'm still here talking to you and not in jail because it works.
You should probably see this back. This slide, I mean, Farhad said that you have been talking about eye rubbing, but you have no absolute evidence of it. I want Swami to speak to you, then you can probably use it in your future debates, because now
I don't think we are refuting. We are certainly saying eye rubbing is extremely important. I don't think any one of us is saying that eye rubbing is not an important factor in keratoconus. Certainly, I don't think we should ever convey anything like that.
So, absolutely. So, Damien and Dr. Farhad, so what we're trying to do is to bring both the concepts together, bring molecular evidence to your subjective findings, okay? So while you're talking about eye rubbing, we were talking about what was causing it to support you. We are in line with you. So we were looking for itch factors, okay? Yeah. The itch factors which can initiate eye rubbing, or it may not even initiate eye rubbing, but the mere presence of it is going to have an effect on the stromal cells and the epithelial cells. We did find that there is an increased level of IgE, for example, TR IgE. That is going to sit on the mast cells on the ocular surface, it's going to sit on the natural killer cells on the ocular surface, and it is unzipping and degranulating, and a whole bunch of itch factors are coming out, and we have measured it, and it is high in Kc, okay? And when we did the eye rubbing and without eye rubbing, we didn't see statistical significance, but there was a little bit of an increase in these itch factors in those who those who eye rub. And those are the categories which you can see that the presence of itch factors is there. The basis for your eye rubbing is there.
No, itch factors in the eye.
Itch factors in the eye, yeah, in the tears. We were figuring that out. Yeah. So that is one. So we are trying to bring in all the concepts in together, okay? So the second one is the neuroimmunomodulation, okay? We most of us agree that keratoconus is immuno-inflammatory mediated by now. So there are pockets of people who don't believe that, but the majority do believe that it's inflammatory in nature. So there is a strong connection between the neuroimmunomodulation, all right? So that is the sympathetic cross-linking Dr. Rossetti was talking about. That is when you disrupt or trigger certain aspects of the corneal nerves, there is a sympathetic wiring which probably facilitates the changes in the other eye. We are not saying that it is happening because of this. While I was listening to all the discussion, they were saying cornea changes, cornea may not change. What we're trying to do is, what could possibly be the basis of these changes? And we're just giving you one after another of building blocks, which we can actually build a wall maybe 5 years later, but we had to keep putting these bricks in. So your point is valid, your point is valid, your point is valid. It's just we have to put them in an order.
One small thing
but
there.
So underlying this, we have another element, which I think we're going to address later this morning, and that's the genetic predisposition.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So we have a gene risk factor plus this on top.
Yeah. But rubbing could be genetically disposed also. No, I do have the last question. I really would like to finish that topic now. But the last question is, I mean, did you ever ask non-keratoconus patients whether they are rubbing or not? Mm-hmm. I'm doing it since I'm aware of you. In every candidate for LASIK is asked. 92% agree that they are rubbing, but none of them has developed the keratoconus. Mm-hmm. So rubbing may be one of the factors, but it's not the only factor.
No, I'm not saying that every patient who rubs will develop keratoconus. We have this model of having a keratotype on one side and the vulnerant agent on the other side. It's like, I'm sorry to repeat that analogy, but it's the best I found. If you go to the beach, you may have a sunburn or you won't have one, depending on your skin type and the level of exposure you suffer from. So what I'm saying is that for some people, an amount of rubbing will deform the cornea, whereas for some others, it won't be enough.
Why is that?
Let's go to the next
cornea
because
stiffer? Is that cornea maybe stiffer, more resistant against rubbing? Or what?
And the way they do, for example, we know that when they do like this, they will have more keratoconus than when they do like that. For example, we notice that women have less keratoconus or they are more from first because they don't rub during the day because of the makeup. And when they remove the makeup with the pads, they usually rub in a way which is not as detrimental as people
Why do you
who
find
like
it
that.
funny?
I'm sorry. I'm not sure if I'm a one finger or a two finger rubber. And the stimulus is very similar. You know, whether you use your knuckles or your
No, it's
fingers.
not.
no, that's
no, it's
big
not
difference.
at all.
That's a
No,
big difference.
I'm sorry, it's not at all. It's not. I mean, the first sign of keratoconus is this. It's not in a topography you'll find it. It's like that. I'm serious. I'm very serious. So
Yeah,
I would
okay.
like to ask the audience. My question is simple. Suppose you have someone whose both parents have keratoconus. The patient has thin cornea, is allergic, but he's never touching his or her eyes. Who believes the cornea can deform on its own?
Can we ask this question to the cross-linkers?
Who believes it's impossible that the cornea spontaneously takes the shape of a keratoconus without any mechanical trauma on the cornea?
I think we move on to from the eye rubbing to the next questions.
I'm sorry, I have to address that. So living induces trauma to the cornea. Blinking, closing your eyes, sneezing, all of those things push on your eye.
No, but it's not the same. There
I
is
agree it's not
tenfold
the same,
magnitude.
but what you're asking is,
I mean, I walk, I don't have a sprained ankle.
there is not a single human, okay, but walking does induce trauma. I mean, it
of
induces, well, so there is not a single living person who doesn't have some impact to their cornea. It has not necessarily anything to do with rubbing. If they
Everyone
blink,
who smokes doesn't get a lung cancer. I agree with that. But my point is, of course, you can have lung cancer without smoking. That's another point. But my point, and that's very important, and the Marfan syndrome is the evidence that if you have a soft cornea, it becomes flatter and thinner, not steep.
But what I was answering is you're saying, can someone have any mechanical trauma to their eye without eye rubbing? Yes, they can, because living induces some level of mechanical eye trauma. Now, a model that says you have to have potentially a genetic predisposition followed by an immunological
Immune trafficking.
challenge, combined with living your life and blinking and sneezing and using the restroom, may be enough trauma, and it may not have anything to do with eye rubbing at its initiation. That would be a model, because no one can exist without any force being exerted on their cornea.
I think this would be the last discussion for the eye rubbing. Now we move to the next one. Otherwise, we will not have. I'll ask this to both Dr. Farad and Theo. I think this question was asked to you. The question is, why do we have no control on how much they flatten?
We have cases even 12 years, constant flattening.
Why do you think?
I have no idea why this happens.
Anybody here can answer?
So can I ask you, does it mean we have overfried the cornea?
I have no idea. There was nothing reported in the early postoperative files that there was too deep demarcation line or too much haze or anything like this. It just continues to flatten. There's a manager of Ferrero. He is coming every year in and just get his follow-ups, and now we have 12 years of follow-up, and it's a constant rate even. It's not.
But one thing for sure, it's not cross-linking per se, because cross-linking stops once you release the pedal of the UV lamp. It's not cross-linking. Cross-linking happens at the time of the cross-linking surgery, not after that.
I can contribute to that. So there is a cellular and molecular explanation to that process, the continuous flattening. It's a mechanobiology feedback.
Teach me.
Sorry?
Teach me.
We'll ask Professor
It's a mechanobiology feedback. Okay, so the stromal cells senses the stiffness of the collagen fibers, and that's the feedback it goes through. The moment you cross-link, you make your collagen stiffer, your corneal cells, or the stromal cells, to be more particular, they get informed about the stiffness, and therefore there is a continuous ongoing remodeling which is going on. In some cases, this probably never stops.
No, but question is, who there has to be a control mechanism of when to stop and when not to. Is it related to the number of keratocytes you kill?
I think both are right. This, what you mentioned, is a common mechanism in mechanobiology.
Yeah.
So you have the, Damien, if we were in a non-living tissue, I would agree with you that it stops when you release the pedal, but we are in a living organism. So we have one reaction wave that is nanoseconds to milliseconds that does the initial reaction. And then we have
If you hold the mic closer to you, please.
Then we have mechanobiological triggers that lead to these long-term changes and conformational changes in a living tissue. I think this is understandable.
So can you just use this figure, go up and you can show keratocytes and just tell us, because there are no real mechanism for this, but we need to have a working hypothesis of why sometimes it keeps flattening over time. And in most of the patient, it doesn't even flatten by a 0.5 diopters, majority of them. What percentage of your people keep flattening for the same, for 4 years or 5 years? What percentage if you do 100 cross-linkings in this month, what percentage of them will show a abnormal flattening, which keeps continuing for 5 years? Do you have any idea on this?
We estimated that fraction from the, we had about 4 to 8% of the patients we followed more than 10 years. In those patients, we saw the flattening, but this is biased, this information, because those guys are coming back because it's constantly flattening, and so it might well be that this percentage is lower. Maybe it's only 1 or 2%.
So Rohit, also, I think it's too generalized thing when we say flattening, but it also depends on the protocol we use. When we were using Dresden protocol earlier, we used to see more flattening. With the accelerated one, the flattening reduces. So with different protocol, even the flattening also changes. So
no, Himanshu, what I'm trying to say is, that's what we discussed in the morning, topography thing. Flattening is not a sign of a good or bad outcome.
Exactly.
But what I was trying to say here is, the bad flattening. The bad flattening is, you flatten like, I know Dr. Ramurthy has a case, or he's shown in the past, where he's done a cross-linking, and over the next 2-3 years, it keeps flattening by 2 diopters, 3 diopters. From a myopic shift, the patient has gone into a hyperopic thing. The question is, we are looking at that inverted comma, the bad flat linkers.
Well, so that's what I'm telling, that these things were more common with Dresden protocol, but it's much less common when the accelerated protocol which we use.
So if you go use this slide quickly, because this may look a little complicated, but this probably, every doubt in science has to have some answers. Yeah. It may be wrong, but it's still nice to know something is happening, because it always, for example, the answer of why do you get the sympathetic cross-linking in the other eye. So if you just quickly, very quickly.
Yeah, very quickly. So we have to pay attention to James Jester's corneal anatomy publications. He has clearly shown how the collagen fibers, the density, the alignments are different in keratoconus and in normal cornea. Okay? So irrespective of the protocol, if we never get to see the misalignment which has happened during the disease process, and that could be one of the factors. So that could feed into the mechanobiology
I don't think, Swami, it's irrespective protocol. It's absolutely known that when you have the cases where the deeper cross-linking was done, the flattening was more. I don't think so you can say that it's just irrespective of protocol. That's true. It is respected to protocol also.
What I meant by irrespective was, what I meant, probably I missaid it, irrespective of the fact that protocol is important is what I was trying to say.
So just to take home from whatever discussion we had in both the groups, for all of us as clinicians practicing in our practice, that immune changes or immunity or immune system of the eye is extremely important in how your cornea behaves behaves after you do any procedure. And for me, cross-linking is one of those procedures where immune factors are very important, because I personally believe it's an immune-mediated disease. And minute you change the keratocytes and you kill the keratocytes, the whole of immune system goes into a complete revamp. And that is a revamp, will completely have a reaction which could be very erratic in some. Yes, sir.
Okay, we've had the observations. I'm still missing the hypothesis. The hypothesis that gives us a feedback onto the observations and how we can modulate